is a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing a legend in my own backyard, Terry Work. Your reputation precedes you. I'm in the poor part of town. I'm in Phoenix, and you're up there where all the rich, smart people live in Scottsdale, Arizona. He graduated from Oregon Health Science University School of Dentistry in 1989. He and his wife spent 4 years in the U.S. Navy as dental officers in San Diego, where they received specialty training. Dr. Work has been in private practice with his wife for the last 25 years in Scottsdale, Arizona. He is a diplomat for the International Congress of Oral Implantology and has lectured on bone grafting, implant placement, oral CDX, and has participated as a mentor for implant institutes. And all my friends that in my backyard that are big into implants, really, they speak extremely highly of you, and it's an honor that you're on the show today. And there's so many things I want to talk about, and I know you probably want to jump right into implants, but, you know, I was sitting here thinking I wanted to start off in a weird way. Podcasters, Terry, they're all under 30. Anytime anybody from the show emails me a question or a thought or a comment or whatever to howard@dentaltown.com, they're either 20% are in dental school, or the rest of them are all under 30. Probably only about once every 3 months, some guy will say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm an old fart and I listen to your show. But I want to start off with something that you probably were thinking I was going to ask, and that is, you've worked with your wife for how many years?
23 years.
And a lot of kids commuting to work. Podcasting is a behavior people do while they're multitasking, driving to work. Most of our show, 85%, they got an hour commute to work. The rest of them either are on the treadmill, or they say like Saturday morning it takes them like 4 hours to clean up their whole house after the week, and they'll listen to 4 shows on Saturday or something like that. But what advice would you give someone to these young kids who met their lover for life in dental school, and now they're going to go work for years and years together, and you did it successfully in a profession that has the average divorce rate, which is, half the marriages fail. So how did you do it?
Well, that's funny. You talk about podcasts and the younger crowd. I've done a lot of go-to meetings on the internet, but Skype was not something I was super familiar with. So I had my youngest son kind of walk me through the ins and outs. And it's just like anything. If you want to program any technology, ask your youngest kid. But he helped me. He listens to a lot of podcasts. And so he kind of helped me through this and get all set up and everything. And it really opened my eyes as to how powerful this medium is. But talking about my wife and I, we met in dental school. Got married between our junior and senior year. Then we joined the Navy together. And so we've just kind of always been together. And so the biggest thing we did when we got out, we found a practice that we spent our time in the military figuring out where we wanted to live, and chose the Scottsdale area. But the first thing we did, we bought a practice, we worked it for 6 months, and then we hired a consultant. Because we could do dentistry fast enough to make a living, but we didn't know how to run the business side of things. So we got connected with a practice management group, and we worked with them for the next several years. And what we found was a lot of the team building we did with them actually helped our marriage. So we would go to all of the meetings together. We would learn about interpersonal communication, conflict resolution, and all that stuff. And it really helped our marriage a lot. We found ourselves using terms in our marriage that we got from the actual dental education. So that was probably the biggest thing. Most of my friends say if I worked with my wife, I would choke her to death before the week was out. So I just tell them, it's all about communicating and setting up a plan like you do for your dental practice. And we get along great. We have a great time.
Now, I want you kids to listen to this. The first thing this genius did was hired a practice management consultant. And when you ask an economist, what does the average dental office produce? They'll say, okay, the office will collect, about 700. The doctor will take on 145. When you ask an average practice management consultant, what does the average dental office do? They'll say, about $1.5 million. And because all the successful people use consultants. And that was your first move. My first move when I owned my office was hired Sally McKinsey. Who did you hire?
We had a management company called Fortune Practice Management, right. Sharon McLeod, and she's still a patient to this day. So We
Does she still do is she still doing it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I th-
She's become a lifelong friend. She's a great gal.
well, tell her I want if she want tell her I want a podcast interview her.
I will definitely tell her.
Yeah, and you know these dentists don't blink at buying a $150,000 CAD CAM machine, a $100,000 CBCT, an $80,000 laser. I mean, they buy every high tech tool, and then they you ask them any of their numbers, they don't know any of their numbers, and you know get your house in order.
Right.
How many successful people do you know that are millionaires from dentistry that don't have a CAD CAM, a laser, or a CBCT?
Right. Yeah, you have to put the numbers together to show support for the technology. There has to be debt service on every piece of equipment. I mean, the rule of thumb at our office, if it was up to me, I would buy everything. If it was up to my wife, we would buy nothing. So we compromise in the middle and we end up getting technology that we actually use day to day. And it just really helps our bottom line and it makes me a better dentist. And that's what I'm all about. I'm all about making sure the patients get the best care with, some technology is cool, but it doesn't really help me be a better dentist. So I have to pick through, and you can't believe the reps because they just want to sell machinery. And I get that, but it's our responsibility to make good decisions that support what your mission statement is.
Okay, well, they're stressed out listening to you because we're at a dozen dental schools a year. In fact, I Skype dental schools. I used to fly all over to lecture for free in dental schools. Now I just Skype into their classes for free. But they're all saying the same thing. They feel bad because they graduate $350,000 of debt. We're in college for 8 years, and they didn't do one ortho case and one implant case. So talk to the kids right now. Put on your dad hat. Your daughter just walked out of dental school. She's never placed one implant. How do you go from never placing an implant to placing an implant? I mean, walk them up that stairway. What would your steps be?
Well, I've as you mentioned, I've been a part of a couple of implant institutes. Really, the smartest thing I've found is to find a class that has the basic premise of mentorship, and that means. And we're putting together an implant class here the end of this year sometime, trying to figure out the details. But it's important to take a class where you can place an implant with someone there who knows what they're doing and can walk you through it. But more importantly, you want that mentorship portion of that, which means you've got somebody you can call. And the curriculum we're putting together is we're going to have maybe a small class, maybe 6 students. They can come and place 4, 5, or 6 implants at my office, and then when it's all over, they can look in their patient base and they can see, well, I want to try this one. It might be outside my comfort zone, so they can email me radiographs. If it's a real difficult case, they can send the patient over. We'll take a CBCT scan at my office. I can walk them through the particulars of how to stay out of trouble and have a good outcome. That way, they've got the mentorship aspect, and they've got someone they can talk to that's in their neighborhood.
So, how does an out-of-state person legally place an implant in your office?
Well, this is mostly targeted at in-state people. That gets a little bit tricky when you have out-of-state people coming in, but what we're focusing on is people in the state of Arizona. So that's what go ahead.
But we solved that puzzle here in Arizona. Did you hear what we all did?
What's that?
So you know the dentist, my buddy Chris Volchek?
I do. Yeah, he's down. My wife has worked down there. I know you can get special licenses for out of state, and we've done that in previous classes. The board, I've been in contact with Elaine at the board, the dental board, and we've been talking about making sure that that's okay. And that may be a portion of our curriculum, but right now we're going to concentrate on local dentists and getting them up to speed, and we may expand into that. It just depends on how the curriculum
Because
goes.
the Arizona State Board of Dental Examiners gave Chris a deal that if out-of-state licensed dentist in good standing comes to the homeless shelter to do volunteer dentistry on vets, all good.
Yeah, the CAST Center. Yeah, that's a really good place. I've been down there a number of times, and my wife has worked down there and donated some time. And so, yeah, that's a really neat program.
Yeah. Well, if you, that is amazing. So it's really changed since you and I got to school. I mean, you graduated in '89. I graduated in '87. Implants in '87. I'd say 80% of the dentists thought the people doing it were crazy.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
now, 2016, it's a standard operating procedure. It's
yeah.
really come a long way.
It really has. And I mean, as far as placing an implant is much easier than doing a distal occlusal on a first molar. But the problem is managing the possible complications and just getting enough experience so that you know what to do under certain circumstances. And I got a lot of surgical experience when I was in the Navy. For a year and a half, all I did was take out wisdom teeth on recruits in San Diego. So I had an opportunity to really see some neat stuff, and I was able to follow what healing is supposed to look like. So as far as that goes, I had a leg up on that. But the placement of implants is, from a technical standpoint, it's not that difficult. But people are a little nervous about things that they don't do a lot. So you have to start off with socket preservation. If you're taking out teeth, you should be preserving that socket. And then 4 months later, you're going to be placing an implant. So if you institute these smaller procedures like socket preservation, it builds your implant practice, because 6 months later, 4 months later, the patients are going to be expecting you to place an implant. So you want to just do diligence on preparation.
Well, Terry, I would love it if you would go slow, use name brands, and walk them through an exact socket preservation. A lot of people complain if you say, I use a suture, and you don't say what kind, but
Sure.
Explain in detail and exactly what you would buy and use to do a socket preservation.
Sure, that's no problem. Well, first of all, the basis for a good socket preservation is atraumatic removal of the tooth. If you're taking out a molar, you really need to section that tooth and take it out. If it's a maxillary molar, you want to take it out, and at like 3 smaller teeth, you want to preserve the existing bone. Take your time, use your handpiece with a surgical 557 burr, cut it mesiodistally, take out the palatal root. Then cut it buccolingually and take out the 2 buccal roots. Then what I use is a material called Cerasorb, which is produced by Curasan, and it's a calcium triphosphate material. It's synthetic. I like it because of its handling properties.
Spell that, Cerasorb?
Cerasorb. I think it's Cerasorb. Cerasorb.
Okay, by the company?
Curasan. Curasan.
I'm so glad you spelled it, because I would have guessed a K with both of those.
Yeah, and my spelling's not great, so that's subject to interpretation. So then what I do is I draw the patient's blood, and that's what you use to hydrate the material. Now this material will soak up the first liquid it touches. So if you use their blood, you make sure you get all the infection out of there. You want good fresh blood. And you place it in with the material and mix it up into kind of a putty form. And then you place it in the socket. You gently place it in the socket. And then what I use, and the thing about taking out a tooth, if it's bleeding a lot, it means there's still granulomatous tissue in there that you need to get out. So you need to clean the socket very well so it's not bleeding a lot. Place the material down in there. Gently pack it with an amalgam condenser, which is the only reason I use an amalgam condenser anymore. But you place it in there, and then I use a material that's a PTFE, polytetrafluoroethylene, which is Teflon, membrane. And I get that from, I can't remember the name of the company. There's a couple companies that carry it. But I use PTFE membranes, and I use PTFE sutures, because the tissue loves it. Bacteria, plaque doesn't stick to it. It heals very well. And you basically place that PTFE membrane underneath the soft tissue, but over the bone. So you create a little space between the periosteum and the soft tissue, or between the periosteum and the bone, and you need about 2 millimeters of extension past the extraction site. You tuck it in there gently, and then you suture over the top, ideally using a horizontal mattress suture. But what this does is it gives a kind kind of a lattice work for the patient's own tissues to heal under, and you'll maintain ridge width and height, and you'll keep the sinus from dropping down in those maxillary teeth. It's a really good procedure.
I want to ask some questions that are asked a lot on Dental Town. I too use the high speed with the 557 long surgical burr, but some people are hearing oral surgeons say that you can't use the handpiece that has air, or you'll get an air embolism, or
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I totally agree with that, and that's why you don't lay a flap while you're using the high speed. I mean, it's no different than doing a prep. Don't lay a flap until after you're done using the high speed, and you'll be fine. The issue really becomes if you're taking out wisdom teeth, and when I take out wisdom teeth, I always use my implant handpiece with a high-speed burr, so it's an electric handpiece. But that is absolutely correct. Don't lay a big flap and then use your high speed, because you can cause issues with that. And all of my patients, I run a course of pen VK for 5 days at 500 milligrams QID. So, and with my patients for pain, I use Toradol injections, works really well, which is ketorolac. Give them an injection into the site that we've placed the local anesthetic. And this really helps manage pain without using narcotics. And the patients really appreciate it. It has fewer side effects, and it's really a good medication.
You know, I think the Prince dying of opioids is really started a huge national conversation. I'm seeing lots of media talking about this, and they're calling out dentists and emergency rooms. And they look at hydrocodone being the #1 prescribed drug in America for over a decade, and it seems to be mostly coming out of emergency rooms and dental offices. What's your they said 41,000 Americans OD'd on opioids last year. What's your thoughts on dentists who after every root canal, every extraction, write out a script for 16, 18, 20 Vicodin?
Well, I've been doing this a while, so I can sniff out a drug seeker from 100 miles away. And this is an alternate to that. It gives really good pain relief. You have to be careful if somebody is allergic to aspirin, or if they're taking blood thinners, then they are not a candidate for this. But I use it in conjunction with, I usually will give them, because the way it's prescribed, you have to give them an intramuscular injection and then write the prescription for the oral. So if the person just wants pain management, then they won't balk at this. If the person says, no, I have to have Vicodin, it's the only thing that works, then you have to be careful. I don't feel like dentists create drug addicts. I would rather give somebody who is seeking drugs than deny somebody who genuinely needed it and they were suffering because I was too willing to really, take the time to figure it out. So, I think overall there is an issue with overprescription of antibiotics and narcotics, but it really boils down to education and just keeping your eye on the ball, and don't fall into, stay curious about this, so you're always educating yourself on what's out there. And for me, this has been a huge, I've been prescribing this particular medication for the last 10 years or so, and it works really well. And I do a lot of connective tissue grafts, and I do some fairly advanced bone grafting and stuff. And I actually have gotten involved in PRF, platelet-rich fibrinogen, and so we draw blood, and we do some things to help, and that really helps with postoperative pain too. But you have to look at what your patient base is, what it is you're trying to accomplish, and have several modalities for taking care of those patients. So, you just have to keep your eyes open and stay committed.
You see my cat down there?
I saw that.
That's funny, because the difference between me and you is I'm bald and my cats have hair. You have hair, but your cats are bald.
Yes. How did you know we had hairless cats?
I read on your website you have 2 hairless cats, and I also thought it was so funny that you mentioned your 2 cats before your 2 boys. You hear that, Ryan? I'm going to change my website. I mentioned my 4 boys first. I'm like, here's a man being true to himself and mentions his cats first.
That portion of the website was done by my wife.
I want to back up a little bit. I'm scrolling through the implant threads. There's 50 categories on Dental Town, and one of them's implantology. I think a lot of the kids, well, first of all, they want to know details like let's go back to the basics. Why do you do bone grafting? Number two, is there a fee for that? What 82% of American dentists participate in PPOs? Is this something a PPO would pay? So talk about, why do you do bone grafting? Is there a fee, and do PPOs pay for this?
Well, starting off, bone grafting is an opportunity to save the patient money in the long run. If you do well, I say bone grafting, I mean socket preservation. So if you do the socket preservation at the time, and yes, there is a fee. So you have the fee for the extraction, there's a fee for the bone graft, and then there's a separate fee for the membrane. And so, I mean, you could charge whatever you want. Some insurances will pay for it. You could even argue that placement of a membrane and grafting is actually grafting of the adjacent tooth. So let's say you're taking out tooth number 14. You could say, I actually did the graft on tooth 13 because there was a defect there. So when you talk to insurance, you're charging out for the adjacent tooth because you're trying to maintain and actually build the bony architecture for the tooth adjacent to the extraction. So that's what we do, is we bill the insurance for the adjacent tooth and membrane grafting. So that's one way that helps insurance pay for it. The reason we're grafting is to keep the bone from shrinking. Isella and Greenwich did a study back in, I think it was 2002, I think. And they showed ridge height and ridge width, with and without grafting, and it showed very clearly there's an advantage to socket preservation. You end up with more bone. You have less pneumatizing maxillary sinuses. So the studies are out there, and they show if done properly, then there's an advantage. And the alternative is, if you don't do it, the patient may need a block graft down the road, which is $3,500 to $4,000. So if you can avoid that, it's a fairly easy sell. It was I can't remember the name of the guy that works for owns BioHorizon. Carl Misch said, if you take something out, you should put something back in. And I truly believe that. You leave that big hole there, and a lot of times you're not doing the patient a service. So
did you say he's the owner of BioHorizon?
No, he was associated with them. Well, he's big in the ICOI, which is, I've spent a lot of time with them. So, and he has some really, really good textbooks. That's another thing I'd recommend. Get a really good reference textbook. I have Carl Misch's Contemporary Implantology. It's a 1,000-page reference book on implants, everything from grafting to.
And what edition is it in now? I mean, I think I bought.
I think it's the
third, seventh.
I think it's I think it might be third or fourth now, and I think I have the second edition. It's a really good reference book.
And I want to also say that to the kids out there: street smart dentists will pay $150 for a 1,000-page book that has all the answers to the universe. And these kids nowadays, they just want to learn the smallest thing. They fly across the country, airfare, stay in a resort, drop $4,000 on a weekend course. And I say, can I see your notes? And they have like 3 pages of notes. I'm like, do you realize you could have bought a 1,000-page textbook for $150, and on Amazon you probably could have got it used, for $75? So be street smart. I mean, there's so much information in textbooks, YouTube. Dentaltown has 4 million posts. You couldn't read those posts if you read around the clock for a decade. There's so much street smart. I want to back up. Sorry, a little more. I'm scrolling on the Dentaltown app under implants. Another problem they have is they're getting mixed signals. They see a tooth, it has perio. Some people are saying treat the perio. Some people, they think just say treat it with forceps. Same thing, there's hard data on apicoectomies, a failed root canal. Back in our day, when we got out of school in the 80s, they used to do retreats all the time. But you look at the apicoectomy data, it's been sliding down because so many times a failed root canal, they're going to extract. Well, you just go into a little diagnosing and treatment planning on when do you treat perio, when do you retreat a root canal, and when do you jump into titanium?
That's a really good question. It's funny. I go to courses still. I still stay up to date on things, and there's nothing worse than going to an implant class, and they show a tooth that's clearly a mechanical fracture. It's down near the gum line, but it's got good, root length, and they say we're going to do an implant. I'm like, whoa. this tooth should be endo, crown lengthening, post, and they just continue on in my head. So we do everything at my practice, so I have the luxury of doing whatever is best for the patient. I don't have to say, I'm going to do an implant because that's what I do. So, I see these things, or they say, oh, never do an implant when there's perio, and I see slides of people with severe perio and they're showing an implant, and I'm like, it's just, you get mixed signals. So what we do is the hierarchy is treat the disease first, restore the patient's ability to chew, and then restore the aesthetics. Well, chewing and aesthetics usually go hand in hand, so that's easy, but get rid of the disease. So if they have perio, you want to treat the perio. If it's hopeless, take the tooth out. If it's severe perio, you probably don't want to graft that site because it's probably going to fail. You want to just get rid of the disease first throughout their mouth. You can't treat, these people are not just a sack of teeth. It's an overall body. You want to help them be healthy overall. So deal with those issues first. Then you go to, let's really evaluate, what do they want? Do they want to save their teeth for as long as possible? Or are they tired of dealing with these issues with this tooth and they want to take it out? Has it had previous endo? There's a ton of different things you need to take into consideration. And again, if it's been retreated and it's failing again, take the tooth out. It doesn't make sense to do all this heroic dentistry and put them through that, because implants are so predictable, but you don't jump right to it. You got to use your head. So for the young dentist coming out, treat the disease first, whatever that disease is. Get them healthier, and then walk them through the rest of the process of looking overall. I work with the state dental board on cases, and I see lots of dentists don't do probings, or they don't use rubber dams when they do endo or whatever, and it drives me nuts, because these are things people got out of dental school and said, wow, I don't have to use a rubber dam anymore. And I use a rubber dam on everything, because it's the right thing to do. Isolation, you keep saliva out of the tooth, you keep stuff from going down their throats. I have had, in my 25 years of practice, I've had one person swallow one thing, and it's because I use rubber dams, and it keeps them safe. So, I'm getting off track here a little bit, but it's impossible to give a blanket statement on when should you do an implant and when should you do endo or retreat. You've got to really just do your homework and treat them right. So,
you know why I always work under a rubber dam?
Why?
Because I tacked it on the ceiling above my operatory chair. So I'm always under a rubber dam.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Dumb joke. Most of my jokes aren't funny. But now I'm going to ask you the biggest can of worms. I don't want to get you in trouble with any of your suppliers or reps or whatever, but come on, they go to the convention and there's 175 different implant systems, and they want to pick a system, and dentists are very much like engineers, scientists, mathematicians, and they kind of get paralysis by analysis. I know dentists in Ahwatukee that have been studying every system for almost 2 or 3 years, and I'm thinking, you could have placed 10 implants by now. Yeah. So how do you get over the paralysis by analysis? Because they're going to have to buy a system, and they're going to have to buy some inventory, and they really want to make a good decision, and their nature is to just go ask 10,000 dentists for 10 years. They're frozen. Help them make that decision.
That's a really good point. I have found I can make any implant integrate, and I can have any implant fail. So there's so many good systems out there, it's difficult. So what it boils down to is value and support. You can get the cheapest implant system, but it's funny, they sell you the surgical kit and then you can't get a hold of them. And without support, it's really worthless, and it'll become so frustrating that you'll give up on it. So you want to find a company that has a rep that you connect with, that is available, and they don't have to know everything. They just have to know where to get the information. They just say, listen, I don't know, but I'll tell you within 24 hours. I hate that when people make promises and then they don't keep them. So just find a rep who will do what they say they will do, and you can connect with. It's really intimidating, because as you build your implant practice, what will happen is you'll find the need for, short fat implants and long skinny ones and different attachments and all this thing. So if you show a new dentist the regular surgical kit, it's intimidating because there's so many drills and so many things in there. The truth is, you will use about 10% of that surgical kit throughout your lifetime. The specific things that you need, like a short fat implant, those don't happen as often, and the surgical kit will seem a lot smaller as you use it because you don't use only but a small corner of it. So, I mean, the main thing is you have to try to get together with a system that speaks to your needs. And again, falling back on the mentoring thing, find somebody who is willing to mentor you about the differences in implant companies and implant styles and the different things, because every month they're coming out with a new thing. Oh, this new coating, or oh, this wetting stuff. Look how it sucks the blood up around the it's ridiculous. If it's good titanium and the design is adequate, they will integrate. The only implants that I can get to integrate are the ones that are really crooked. It seems like if they're not placed properly, they integrate every single time. So, it's just a matter of trying to find a company that will support you, and maybe, like I said, a mentorship program where you can get information, or like Dental Town has a lot of information on things to do, and chat lines where you can ask questions. So you need to stay curious and stay connected, and it really helps.
So who's your local support here in Arizona?
In terms of implant stuff?
Yeah.
You know what? I've been doing this a long time. I don't refer out anything really to speak of. If I get in trouble, I have an oral surgeon down the street that I use, Dr. Robert Guyette. He's great.
I know.
He's a great guy. He has I've been working with him for a long time. I mostly reference, like I said, textbooks and that kind of stuff.
Who's your implant? What implant company and their support person did you go with?
It's funny. I work with Burkhart Dental Supply Company. They're out of the Pacific Northwest, out of Tacoma, Washington. Great company, good support. And they just started carrying a line. I actually have about 8 different implant surgical placement kits, because over the course of time, things have changed. I've used Noble BioCare. I've used Revoice. I've used Cybron. I've used a bunch of different ones. I've used Neodent, which is fairly new. I was the very first person to purchase a Neodent implant kit because they're out of Brazil, and they're getting to be pretty heavy hitters in the implant.
Straumann just bought them.
Yes, Straumann owns them, and they're kind of their economy line of implants. Good implant company. I went down to Curitiba, Brazil, and did a surgical course down there for 11 days. So I got to see their manufacturing plant. I had a great time. Brazil was amazing. I've never eaten so much meat in my life. The restaurants were incredible. Anyway, we had a great time down there. And, I'm looking now at IDS Megagen right now is a company that I'm looking at real strong. And I may be partnering with them to do some mentorship program. So, it's the basic design of implants. They may look different, but it's basically the same thing. Drill it whole, don't overheat it, and fill it with a good product.
Are you going to do that with Kerry Lyons in New Jersey?
Yeah, I'm just super, this is in its infancy of talks. I've just sat down and talked with them about a possibility of putting together a curriculum at my office. So it's real early on, but the implant system is great. It really checks all the boxes. It's not just the implant design, but it's the connection has to be good, and the restorative parts need to be adequate. It needs to speak to your listening for the kind of practice you have. And so this looks like a really good implant company. So I never switch over to a new one. I have an inventory of implants, and I place the implant that I think best suits the situation.
So which one is Burkhart going to start carrying?
That one, Megagen.
Burkhart's going to, or will that be an exclusive, or
I think Burkhart. That's the only one Burkhart carries, because they haven't been in the implant. They haven't been in the implant market, but I've been working with them for.
Does Benco carry implants?
Who?
Benco?
Benco also carries IDS and Megagen. They're
Okay.
the other company that carries it. Yeah.
Does Shiner Patterson carry a Megagen?
I'm not sure about that. I work, like I said, I work exclusively with Burkhart. Again, it boils down to loyalty. I've been with them so long. If I have a breakdown in my office, they are there in about a half an hour to keep me running. If you do the thing where you buy cotton rolls here and 2x2s here and toothbrushes here, it doesn't give any loyalty, and they'll get you a repairman when they can. So
now, is your favorite implant at Megagen? Is it the Ankylos? Or not really?
No. Megagen doesn't carry Ankylos.
Or any ridge. I'm sorry, any ridge.
Any ridge is the one I think it's their heavy hitter. So that's probably going to be the one that I place the most. But like I said, this is in its infancy, and I'm doing my due diligence on this. But right now I'm placing mostly Neodents and some Nobel BioCares. And again, I have a fairly large inventory, and so I can cover all of the bases for what I need. So, yeah.
Yeah. How often do you talk to Robert Guyette?
It's been a while. He just brought on a partner that I've actually seen more than him. Robert's a pretty busy guy, and it's been a while since I sat down with him. But I sat down with his partner, Dr. Beener, not too long ago, just to kind of make contact. And super nice, super great. My wife goes there all the time and gets facials, so she's there all the time. So
yeah, I love Robert. He's got a really interesting new pioneering nitrous oxide delivery system.
I use that, the Silhouette. Yeah.
The Silhouette, so it's for sale now?
Oh, yeah, it's been for sale. And it's funny because I called him right after I bought it, and he goes, if you have any problems, you call me directly. So it's nice. It's a good system.
So explain that system. I thought it was genius. I mean, talk about that.
Yeah, well, it's just a low-profile system, so you can do, like when I'm doing an aesthetic case, the other nitrous nose pieces are just too large and they get in your way. The Silhouette goes partially up their right nostril, and it's very low profile, and it's just out of your way, and it works really well.
And who's carrying that?
You know what? I think we order that through Burkhart, and I'm not sure what company carries it, but I'm pretty sure we order that through our dental supply company. It's a little bit more expensive, but I think it's worth it. That's what we use now.
Yeah, so basically it was instead of having a big bulky deal, it's 2 cannulas up your nostrils, right?
Yeah, well, it has one cannula that goes up your right nostril, and then as you exhale, it's exhausted out through the other one. So the only downside is if somebody has a really small nose or a kind of a concave mid-face, the fit is not great. So we occasionally still use the older system, but the Silhouette is what we use mostly, and it's a good system. So I'm going to have to call him and tell him I plugged him on your podcast.
Well, he's my most I just think about him 24/7 because he has this amazing surgical filming studio, and he has taped literally thousands of every inconceivable surgery you can imagine, and they're just sitting in a computer.
Wow.
And I'm like, my God, you could be educating dentists from Tanzania, Ethiopia, Istanbul, and Mongolia. And he's like, I know. Someday I gotta start editing and splicing and all this stuff like that.
Is that his Scottsdale? Is that his Scottsdale practice?
Yeah. I mean, he has taped.
He's right down the street from me, so he's a great guy.
Yeah. So back again. So if this kid wanted to buy a system, name your top systems that you think they couldn't go wrong with.
Well, they definitely couldn't go wrong with Megagen. It's a great system, very complete. And again, I know the rep personally will take care of you. The guy I work with is Joel Gonzalez, and he's just a real quality guy. I went out to lunch with him actually a couple times last week, and so hopefully we'll put something together. But that's a good system. Again, a lot of it boils down to the support you get and your rep. I've sat down to lunch with him, and he knows more about. He's a rep, and he's a dental. He used to be a dental assistant for a fairly large implant practice. I want to say it was in California, but he knows more about implants than most dentists I talk to. It's pretty impressive. So There's lots of good systems out there. You need to just kind of take a look and get a company that's willing to support you and answer your questions and be there when you need them. So, but right now I'm looking really hard at switching over to IDS MegaGen.
Yeah, and they just bought, what was the one in Israel they just bought? So Straumann bought MegaGen out of Korea, Neodet out of Brazil. Was it MIS or MID out of Israel?
That I'm not.
MIS implants. Yeah, they just bought MIS implants. So Straumann's wrapped up the number one implant in Korea, Israel, Brazil, and they're already huge in Europe. So yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer. Okay, I want to switch to a different question.
Sure.
You know, this is the exact words they say. They say, Howard, I walked out of school with $350,000 in student loans. Now I'm supposed to buy $100,000 CBCT, dude. That's a lot of money. And so if everybody, so they do what everyone says, buy $100,000 CBCT, $150,000 CEREC machine, and an $85,000 laser. They just doubled their student loan debt with 3 purchases. So what do you say? She's 25 years old. She's commuting to work right now, and she's like, God, $100,000 CBCT. What would you tell her?
I would go back to the very first thing we talked about. Get a management company. Get somebody that looks at your numbers. They pay for themselves by helping you know what your numbers should be. You shouldn't be buying a CBCT. Well, my particular one, which is made by Instradent, is great because it's a pano machine and it's a cone beam scanner. It has a head that flips around, so I'm taking my cone beams, or I'm taking my panoramics and my cone beam scans, and it has the same footprint as my old Panorex machine. But back to the original question, you know, coming out of school, you want to work that place and see what you're in for, see what's not working. You got to not only do the dentistry, you've got to manage employees. You've got to figure out who's working in your best interest, who isn't. And you need somebody who's can look at your practice objectively. We get into these practices and we make excuses about why we're keeping certain employees and why we're doing things the way we're doing them. And it's really easy to miss the forest for the trees. So I would say find somebody that can look at your numbers. There's lots of these management companies that'll come in and do a free evaluation of your practice and help you figure out what your blind spots. So that's the first thing I would do. Don't buy a big piece of equipment unless it's supported by the numbers. And you need to buy things, you need to look at what is my tax ramifications. You buy all that in 1 year, you hit your tax ceiling very quickly, and then if you'd have spread it out over 2 or 3 years, you could have taken that tax credit in the year that you bought it. So you need to spread things out, and you need to figure out what kind of practice you're going to run. I mean, if you're not doing a bunch of implants and a bunch of retreat endo and that kind of stuff, you may not need a CBCT scanner. If you're not doing a bunch of wisdom teeth.
So you went with Instradent.
Instrumentarium.
Oh, Instrumentarium. I thought you said Instradent. I'm sorry.
No, Instrumentarium has the OP300, which is the scanner that I have.
Okay.
Really good scanner.
And you like that one?
Oh, I've had it for about 4 years, and I'm going down to Dallas in September and giving a lecture on CBCT scanners in a GP's office it's a digital symposium down in Dallas. And then there's a thing called 3D University that happens in Boston in September, and I'm giving the same lecture there, just talking about how I use it in my practice and what I use it for.
Well, you just walked into my biggest rant. So on Dental Town, we started in '98, and we got 217,000 members. When Steve Jobs put the internet in the Motorola Nokia phone with the iPhone, and the Dental Town app, so we got 50,000 on the app, and we put on the website and the app, we put out the online CE because I was always seeing those University of Phoenix online.
Yeah.
We put up 350 courses. They've been viewed 600,000 times. So if you're giving the same lecture twice, if you'd ever put it on Dental Town, we love you long, long time. I mean, that would just, it's amazing. I mean, the number of people sitting in your lecture in Dallas and Boston, you could do that times 100. And,
yes.
and in faraway places like Somalia, and so many. They I look at the views. I mean, the views in Dentaltown online say just from Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Syria. I mean, it's just amazing. Um, so I want to ask you the most controversial question in implantology. So these young kids, they walk out of school. All the young guys are saying surgical guide, surgical guide, surgical guide. But all the 60-year-old oral surgeons and periodontists in our neighborhood say, kid, that's like training wheels on a bike. I've placed 5,000 implants for 30 years. And I've never used a surgical guide once. I wrote a column one time to surgical guide or not to surgical guide. It was the most views, clicks, and comments I'd ever written on a column since 1998. So you have the old guys saying training wheels, baloney, never use one once. The young guys saying use it all the time. Where do you fit in that,
Hell,
Terry?
I'm in the middle. I mean,
Awesome.
I use them occasionally. Here's when I use them. If I've got issues with space, and again, the first thing is do no harm. Let's say I'm putting 3 implants in the areas of 18, 19, 20, and there's a fairly resorbed ridge. I may use a guide to place those because it controls my depth. So, but as far as using them a lot, I mean, here's really the two circumstances. If you want to go flapless and you're doing like an all-on-4, something like that, guides are good because they're fast. You don't have to lay a flap, but you have to have a big ridge, and you know they'll heal faster if you're not laying a flap. If you're not using a guide, a lot of times you need to lay a flap so that you can see what you're doing. So sometimes, I mean, I've even done it where I've done the guide, and then they can't open their mouth wide enough for me to use the guide the way it's designed. So nothing happens in a vacuum. You know, you have to really be looking at these things from the standpoint of what makes sense, because you're going to charge the patient more for a guide a lot of times because the guides can be expensive. And a lot of times you get this guide and you realize I can't use the damn thing. So in a dentulous case where you're placing 6 implants on the maxilla, I think that's an excellent place because you get nice parallelism. It helps you with depth. There's lots of good reasons to use a guide, but I'm on neither camp. I use them sometimes. So
Well, that's a sign of intelligence. I mean, every great philosopher of all time says, beware of extremists.
yes,
And, you know, life is not yes, no, up, down, right, left. Moderation is the key to everything.
avoid always and never. Yeah.
Always and never. So I want to ask you another massively controversial thing. Mini implants. There are so many oral surgeons that just consider that's only what amateurs use. There are some oral surgeons that sit there and say, you know, I used to play. I've heard this exact numbers. I used to place 500 implants a year, and then I realized that was the Cadillac, and I started offering the low cost mini implants, ball and O-ring, and now I'm still doing 500 implants a year, but I'm doing 500 mini implants. So I'm selling a Cadillac and a Chevy. This is in particular a podcast I did with an oral surgeon out of Germany, Berlin, Germany. And so talk about mini implants, which by definition is what? Anything under 3 millimeter diameter, 2.9 millimeters and less?
I think it's smaller now. I think it's 2.5 and under, I think.
Okay.
You know, the definition fluctuates. I
But
only use mini implants as a temporary solution. Let's say we place some implants and I want something to put a temporary bridge on while the implants heal. I'll use mini implants to support that, and then I take them out. I don't like mini implants. I think, you know, they bend, they are destructive to the ridge sometimes. I mean, I'm not going to say never. I'm not going to say always. I think you have to be very, very careful with mini implants. I mean, anything can fail. But mini implants just seem to have an issue because if you're using a mini implant, it means you're inherently on a tiny ridge or you probably wouldn't be using it. So bone availability is an issue. And I think people use them under circumstances where they're overstressed. Mini implants opposing natural dentition, I think you really need to beware. You just have to really be careful. Some of the implants are so small they bend under load. So you have to really be careful.
Let's switch subjects to oral CDX. Why are you interested in oral CDX?
Well, I did. That's kind of that was the very first lecture gig I got was with oral CDX, and the reason was I did we did an oral cancer screening for all of the umpires for the professional baseball league, or for the baseball league down in Tucson. They had spring training. We went down there, and all of the umpires were there. So we did oral screenings on them with the oral CDX. So when all of the results came back, my name was on every single one of them. So oral CDX thought, man, this guy's a heavy hitter in this, so we're going to ask him to lecture for us. So I said, well, I love talking about it. So I put together a curriculum and did a couple of lectures for them. And it helped me realize how much I enjoy teaching things. A lot of dentists make a little bit of money and then they buy a walnut farm or something and then waste a bunch of money. I thought, you know what, I'm going to stick with what I know. So I do stuff inside my profession because it's what I know. And so that was mostly a springboard to lecturing on other things. And actually now what we use in our practice is a ultraviolet light system for detecting early oral cancer. And we just instituted it a couple of months ago. It's called the Veloscope. And my wife runs our soft tissue management program, so she would be the expert on the Veloscope because they do that in hygiene. But, early detection for oral cancer, we know that the success rates for oral cancer are just terrible. Once it's visible, the survival rates are terrible. So we're trying to institute things that will catch it early and so that it's more treatable. So the oral CDX we don't do as much anymore. We use the Veloscope.
What I've never been able to figure out, one of the biggest mysteries in dentistry is, like, you take all that Veloscope and the light, all those technologies come from the other end with females.
Yes.
And with females, they go in there regularly, they get checked for cancer, cervix, all this stuff, insurance pays, whatever. Sure. And then the other end of the body, the mouth, and Delta, does any insurance pay for that?
Some do, but not very.
But could you imagine at the Democratic National Party if insurance, if Hillary and Michelle Obama were up there and health insurance covered prostate exam but not vaginal or cervical or women body part exam? I mean, and that's the way it is in dentistry. I mean, if you're a female, the same technology and everybody pays and does it, and then you go to the other end of the human body and everybody's like, the mortality is 50,000 a year and very, very high, and no one pays for it, and it's never been adopted. I thought when I was in dental school in '84 that, this will just be routine, and here it is 30 years later and it hasn't even started.
No, I mean, with the whole, you see the ads on TV for the human papilloma virus and all that stuff. I mean, they're just hitting it hard with that, but yet they're not saying anything about oral cancer necessarily. And so, for us, and there is a fee for the Veloscope. We bill insurance, but we tell them, listen, this is probably not going to be covered. If you get help, great. But we just want to get a baseline for you. And with this Veloscope, you can take photographs and email them to the patient's chart so that you have a comparative analysis down the road. And I thought patients were going to balk at it and not say anything, but with the coincidental institution of the HPV commercials that we're seeing nationally, our patients are really allowing us to do it. I was a little surprised by the numbers. Over half, I would say, are having it done through our hygiene program. So I think it's a really good service, and it ends up being a little profit center for the practice. I mean, it's not huge, but you also know, listen, because if we miss something and a patient ends up, dying from oral cancer, that would be devastating. So again, it's all back to what's best for the patient. So
the thing that then I think, everybody, dentists always think that the end of dentistry is corporate dentistry and PPOs. And I always look at the fact that the data, the most embarrassing data for me is oral cancer and flu shots. I mean, the largest dental insurance companies, Delta, Concordia, all these big monster billion-dollar companies don't cover oral cancer screenings. And it's like, why does that not outrage dentists? And the second one is when you look at each year from the influenza, 8 to 38,000 Americans die each year from the flu. And a lot of times, the last healthcare entry point they were in was the dental office. And my 4-year degreed hygienist can't give a flu shot. I'm an 8-year college degree. I can't give a flu shot. But if I go to Walgreens, a $12 hour farm tech who's not even a pharmacist, went to school 9 months, can give a flu shot. And if I do that, I'll lose my license. And it's like, we should be the #1 entry point for a flu shot, especially for seniors. I mean, if you're 40 years old and don't worry about the flu, whatever, but it's kind of sad that you come in and you're cleaning grandma's teeth and all you're worried about is if she has gum disease, and then 4 weeks later she dies from influenza. And it's like, dude, she was in your office and gave you $100 bill, and you went to treat her gums and didn't give her a flu shot, and it's not even legal. And then you do, and then the mom comes in and she just had her annual pap smear, and they did all the same exact technology. And then they come in, oh, well, this is the other end. And even though you smoke a pack a day and you're Irish and drink, we don't have any oral cancer screening. I think that's bizarre. Crazy. So what else? I only got you for how many more minutes? I only got you for 4 more minutes. Let's talk about the macro. This is another question we get from Dennis. I only got you for 6 more minutes. A lot of kids come out of school we got 2 schools in our backyard. We got Glendale's Midwestern, and we got AT Still in Mesa, Arizona. And a lot of these kids are, they're looking at me kind of scared, and they say, did you and Terry work, did you guys graduate in the good old days? I mean, I graduated in 2016 and I got $350,000 student loans, and I see corporate dentistry. I see when you guys got out of school, it was indemnity insurance, and you submitted your fee and they just paid percent. Now it's PPOs, which are 40% lower. If you got 2 sons and 2 cats, if your 2 cats just graduated from dental school, would you say that was a good idea, or would you tell your cats you should have been an engineer or a plumber?
I would tell them to get into computer industry. So neither one of my children was ever interested in becoming a dentist. Both of their parents are dentists, and neither one of them showed even the least interest. My oldest son has his degree in video game programming. So if anybody knows anybody that needs a video game programmer, put the word out because he needs a job. And then my younger son goes to ASU, and his major is computer science. So here's the thing. I would try to convince somebody to do, I love dentistry. I truly love it. But it's got high suicide rates. It's got high divorce rates. It's got high alcoholism rates. So there's some stress there somewhere. So it's not an easy thing to love. I feel very fortunate.
You hear that, Ryan? I've got 2 out of 3. All I need to do now is kill myself, and I'll be a perfect trifecta.
Can we finish this podcast first?
Well, tell your sons, I've been looking for an app developer. I got 5 programmers. 4 of them are on the Dentaltown PC, and 1 is on the app, and the app is growing twice the rate as the PC. I've been looking for an app developer for a year.
I've got a guy for you.
Okay, tell them. And if your sons are at school or know the network or whatever, put out the word, because it's so app development takes twice the time, because you have to write it for iPhone, half the market.
Sure.
And then as soon as you push it out, then you got to write it for Samsung, Android.
Absolutely.
So every single thing you do takes twice as long. So I want to just have one guy do the iPhone and one guy do the Samsung.
Well, my son is in the process right now of developing an app that they're going to try to take to market. So he's very familiar with all that stuff. I'll get you the information.
Oh, great, great. So then, when we got out of school, if you told your buddy, you know what, I'm going to take 4 years and do what Terry and his wife did, and I'm going to go join the Navy, and you talk about all this experience. But now it seems like if they come out of school and they say, well, I'm going to go join a corporate dentistry for 4 years and all that stuff. Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, again, for us, we did it because we didn't know where we wanted to live. I was born and raised in Oregon. I lived in California, so those two places were out. So we had two kids in the U.S. Navy. While we were in the Navy, my wife had two children there at Balboa Naval Hospital. We spent the last year figuring out where we wanted to settle down. So for us, it worked out really good. Now, if you're coming out of school and you know where you want to live and you've got a practice lined up, I mean, that might make more sense. But for us, it was an opportunity to really make the good decision to move here, and we're so thrilled that we did. So, I mean, it's a personal decision. And, when we were in, they didn't pay for your schooling. They just deferred your loans and gave you a job, and you got experience. And then we were in for 2 years, and a guy came in and said, yeah, they paid for all my schooling. I'm like, well, crap, I wish I'd have waited, So the military it manages itself by need. If there's impending war, they're going to hire a bunch of dentists. If there's nothing going on, they might push you out. So you really have to do your homework and see what makes sense for you.
So, do your friends, when you moved from San Diego to Arizona, did your friends ask you if you're not right in the head? I mean, how do you start where I want to retire in San Diego and move to the desert where it's 119 in the shade? Have you been regretting that decision?
Never, not for a day. I don't like coastal overcast. I like waking up every day to blue skies. My idea of the ocean is the Caribbean, not the Pacific. It's cold and it's full of seaweed and great white sharks. So I never regretted it once. We still go over there and vacation with friends that we still know that live on the naval base there. But I've never regretted moving here. I love it. Even in the middle of the summer, if it wasn't for the summers, everybody would live here. So I like the summer.
What I can't figure out in San Diego is, we're both successful doctors. I couldn't afford to live there. We were walking down the beach one day, and there was just this little bitty house, and it was across the deal, and I was sitting there like, well, that would be just a fun little something. It was like $3 million.
It's ridiculous.
It was the size of my 3-car garage.
Yeah, that kind of stuff just sticks in my throat. I just can't. We used to go to La Jolla all the time and see these little surf shacks that were, like you said, just ridiculous. And that's another thing. Everybody crowds toward the ocean. So I've got a house here with I'm on some acreage. I've got elbow room. I'm out away from stuff. So I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love living here.
Now, you're an Invisalign provider too.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm the 60 minutes up. Can I ask an overtime question?
Sure.
What are your thoughts on Invisalign?
Oh, I love Invisalign, especially if, as long as you're realistic about your expectations. I do a lot of relapse Invisalign, where a person had braces, they didn't wear their retainers, so I use it mostly for either relapse cases or for setting them up for an aesthetic case. Let's say somebody grinds their teeth, I will put them in Invisalign for 6 to 9 months to get the teeth where I want them, and then do full mouth rehabilitation. That's what I use it mostly for. I'm very realistic about the expectations. I don't sell it to everybody, and I've got a great referral for ortho, Chuck Waite here in Scottsdale, and his son just joined his practice. He's my go-to orthodontist, and so if the case is more complicated, I'd send him to an orthodontist.
Well, tell him I would love to podcast interview him too.
Okay.
He's a stellar orthodontist, and that's amazing. So last question. I know you got patience. One last question. I'm scrolling on Dental Town. I'm going through the implants. There's 50 categories: root canals, fillings, crowns, implantology issues. Here's the problem. They read the textbooks about, you don't want to place implants in smokers, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is, guys like you and me and your wife, we're not the ones losing all of our teeth. So they read why you don't do these in smokers, but come on, usually the people losing all their teeth, aren't they more likely to be smoking, drinking, not brushing, not flossing? I mean, why did they lose their teeth?
Right, exactly. Well,
so how do you have an ideal protocol in a not ideal world?
Well, you don't. I mean, again, I always tell my patients, listen, I'm not your mother. I'm not here to tell you what you should and shouldn't do. I'm here to provide a service. If you smoke, it's more likely to fail. So and people think, well, the smoke kills it. Well, no, it has to do with the nicotine constricting the vascularity to the site and all that stuff. So they think, well, if I stop smoking for a couple weeks around it, then it won't fail. You know what? That's why you have them sign a consent form. Here's the things I told you. Don't smoke, don't drink, don't open beer bottles with your new implant, all the stuff that you can think of. And it's their decision. It's their money. There's no guarantees in dentistry. I tell my patients, listen, you get the same guarantee God gave you on the first set of teeth, and that is there is no guarantee. So it's just a matter of informing them of the risks and having a signed consent, and then you just go from there.
And what would you say probably the increased failure rate is if Grandpa smoked all the way through his the whole ordeal?
Oh God, I would
do
say,
you think it's a few percent, 10%, 20%?
I would say that, again, I'm just spitballing here, but I would say in my smoking patients, I see a failure rate, like my success rate's right around 90% on my implants. With the smokers, it's probably closer to 80.
Yeah.
Because we get them cleaned up. We make sure they're on a good maintenance program. If they're perio, they need to come in every 3 months for supportive periodontal therapy. My wife has put together our soft tissue management program. Is amazing. It's right up there with one of the best because she is so meticulous about taking care of patients and documenting, and so it's outstanding.
So does Marianne also place implants, or do you guys do different things to cover more areas?
Here's what I say. Dr. Marianne does whatever she wants, and I do the rest. So she says, what's wrong with that? She runs a soft tissue management program. She has no interest in placing implants. She did a lot of surgical stuff in the Navy, just as I did, but she just wants to do what she wants to do, and I'm fine with that.
So the answer to the old age question, everybody our age grew up on, what was that, the Lost at Sea, the skipper?
Oh, Gilligan's Island?
Gilligan's Island. Every boy, when you're in elementary school, every boy asks every boy, who would you marry, Marianne or Ginger? And Terry picked Marianne.
Yes, I did.
So are you glad you picked Marianne, or are you wishing you'd gone with Ginger?
Well, since I know she knows how to watch podcasts, I'll say I'm really glad I picked.
Hey, Terry, seriously, it's an honor that you spent an hour with me today. Thank you so much for educating all these dentists. This was an outstanding podcast, and thank you so much for spending an hour with me today.
Thanks, Howard. Have a good day.
All right, buddy. See you around. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.